Forklifts are extensively used throughout industry today and make the lifting and transportation of many loads an easy task. While being a useful piece of equipment, it can also be quite hazardous to the unknowing or inexperienced operator. Regardless of their application, there are certain critical details a forklift operator should be aware of to ensure the safe operation of a forklift. These can be broken down into 4 distinct areas: daily inspections, understanding what and how loads can be lifted, general operating procedures, and finally, operational rules that apply in designated work areas. Let's start by looking at daily inspections. It is the responsibility of the forklift operator to perform a daily inspection prior to using the forklift for any job, task, or function. The daily inspection can be broken down into 2 major areas: pre-operational checks, which are conducted prior to starting the forklift, and operational checks, which are performed after starting the forklift but before commencing any task. When conducting the pre-operational check, the following items should be inspected. Check the forks for cracks, wear, and damage, and also ensure they are properly locked in position on the mast. Check the mast is secure and the lifting chains are well lubricated and free from damage. Also check that there are no hydraulic leaks from hoses, connections, or on the main lifting rams. Look for loose or missing wheel nuts. Check that tires are free from cuts, damage, and excessive or uneven wear. If appropriate, check tire pressures. Check for obvious damage to lights, instruments, and gauges, such as broken lenses. Ensure the forklift is not overdue for service. Seats and seat belts should be secure, functional, and in good condition. Ensure both foot and hand controls are not damaged and are adequately labeled. Check the levels of engine, hydraulic, and transmission oils and ensure you are aware of the correct type of oils that are appropriate for your forklift. The best way to check the radiator water level is through the overflow reservoir. Never remove a radiator cap if the forklift engine is hot and pressure has built up in the coolant system. If water needs to be added, wait for the water temperature to cool, and as an added precaution, wear gloves. Check adequate fuel level for the day. Some forklifts have a gauge, whilst others may have a dipstick. Check for fan belt tension by applying slight pressure on top of the belt. Check for oil, fuel, and hydraulic leaks and any other general obvious faults, including any attachments that may be fitted to the forklift. Now, satisfied that the forklift is safe to start, make sure you follow the correct starting procedure. This could vary not only between different forklifts, but also under different climatic conditions. Now, whilst the forklift is started but still stationary, we should check the following. Check the hydraulics are fully operational by fully raising and lowering the forks and then fully tilting the forks forward and back. Sound the horn to ensure it is functional. Check these are all operational. To test the park brake, place the forklift in gear and ensure it does not creep forward or backwards depending on the gear selection. With some forklifts, the transmission is automatically disengaged when the park brake is applied. The next 2 operational checks require the forklift to be traveling. To test the foot brake, travel slowly forward and smoothly apply the brake to effect a stop. Again, travel slowly forward and turn the steering wheel fully one way and then the other. Listen and feel for any abnormalities. The forklift is now ready for work. With the forklift in a safe and fully operational condition, many inexperienced operators would think they are ready to start work, but there are a number of important factors which need to be known before any attempt is made at lifting a load. What is the rated capacity of the forklift? These details are clearly displayed on the manufacturer's data plate, which is usually located within reading range of the operator's seat. The data plate should include the following: the safe working load at a nominated load center, an additional safe working load rating with the mast fully extended and the forks tilted fully forward, the mast tilt angles, both forward and back, the maximum lifting height, and the recommended tire pressures. In order to understand the safe working load of a forklift, you must know what the term load center means. Load center can be defined as the distance measured from the heel of the forks to the center of the load, and in this case, the center refers to the center of gravity of the load. Here in this example, we can see this forklift has a safe working load of 2.4 tons at 2-foot load center. Therefore, this 2-ton load can be safely lifted because its center of gravity is within the 2-foot load center. Where is the load to be located? Is the path free from obstructions, and is the surface level? At what height will the load need to be lifted to? Is it within the lifting capacity of the forklift? What is the weight of the load? Be sure to be certain. Looks can be deceiving. How is the load packaged? Is the weight evenly distributed on the pallet? Is it stable? Can it move? Loads like this need to be properly chalked and, if necessary, secured with ropes. With large drums like this, one should be transported only when centered on the pallet. Two should be positioned like this towards the backrest of the mast. Three like this, and four like this. Will the load restrict your forward vision? If so, turn around and drive in reverse, always looking in the direction of travel. Is the load classified as a hazardous substance? In some cases, this may result in the need for the forklift operator to wear additional protective equipment. Having evaluated all these load and load handling factors, we are in a position to make valid judgments that will enable us to safely perform the tasks required. The final word on loads can be raised by the next question: does the task warrant the use of a forklift? It is important to realize that not all loads can be lifted with a forklift. In some cases, it may be safer and more appropriate to use a mobile crane. Don't be lured into using a forklift just because it's there and that's what everybody else does. Armed with the knowledge of knowing the forklift's capabilities and limitations, we are now ready to commence operations. But to carry out these activities safely, we need to be familiar with 4 critical procedures: picking up a load, setting down a load, parking procedure, and fault discovery procedure. To pick up a load from a stack, first ensure that the forks are evenly spaced apart and correctly positioned to ensure that the load will be balanced. Travel slowly in towards the load, ensuring you approach it square on. Stop just short of the load like this, and adjust the mast if necessary so that it is vertical. Raise the forks to the required height, stop, then slowly move forward and engage the load, making sure it is hard up against the backrest on the mast. Lift the load so that it clears the stack, and keep the mast vertical. This is particularly important when operating at high levels. Remember, the forklift is at its most vulnerable when the mast is at full extension. Look behind and check that all is clear. Then slowly reverse back so the load is clear of the stack and stop. Lower the load and adopt the correct traveling position. The fork should be close to the ground and the mast tilted back like this. Having reached your destination, approach the stack square on and stop just short. Tilt the mast back into the vertical position. Raise the load to a height slightly above the top of the stack. Ease forward and locate the load directly over the stack. Lower the load onto the stack. Look behind before you reverse out to check for anyone who may have walked up behind you. Reverse back a short distance to enable you to lower the forks and adopt the correct traveling position. On completion of the forklift's tasks, or at the end of each day, you should always follow the correct parking procedure. First, park in a safe place on a flat and level surface. Make sure it is not in front of any emergency exits or restricting access to any emergency equipment. Next, tilt the forks fully forward and then lower them to the ground. Place all the controls, including the transmission, in neutral and apply the park brake. Switch the engine off and remove the keys from the forklift. The last procedure that forklift operators must be familiar with is the procedure to follow if a major fault is discovered while conducting checks or operating the forklift. But what constitutes a major fault? Well, a good example would be if you discover that the brakes weren't functioning adequately. It is important to point out that this procedure relating to fault discovery should be followed if you personally feel unsafe because of a defective item. It may be a safety or operational-based fault, it does not matter. If you feel it is unsafe to operate, then you should follow the correct parking procedure, remove the keys from the ignition to prevent anyone else from operating the forklift, and apply an out-of-service or danger tag to warn others of the fault. Immediately report the problem to the appropriate person and do not operate the forklift until the problem has been rectified. In addition to the operating procedures, there are a number of rules which need to be observed to ensure the safe operation of a forklift. Always keep within the driving cage and always wear your seatbelt. Many horrific accidents have occurred when operators have reached through the mast and whilst moving forward have knocked the control levers. In the event that anyone walks between the forklift and other objects, warn them off. It is particularly dangerous if your vision is restricted either by the load or because the person is crouching down. You should only travel at a speed that permits you to come to a stop over a minimal distance. The type of surface will also impact on what speed you may travel. As a general rule, no faster than walking pace is safe. Take care when approaching a blind corner and always sound your horn. Avoid crossing gradients. The lateral stability of a forklift is greatly reduced when a forklift, with or without a load, travels across a gradient. When approaching a gradient, stop and ensure the load is raised high enough so that it doesn't bottom out. Always have the load in front of you when traveling up and the load trailing you when coming down. If a load is not within the lifting capacity of the forklift, if practical, rearrange the load or use a forklift with a greater lifting capacity or an alternative lifting device. Do not add additional counterweights. Forklifts are usually designed for one person. Jumping on for a short ride or using the standard forklift as a portable elevator are simply not acceptable practices under any circumstances. Pallets which are damaged may break while being used and can obviously cause accidents. Only carry well-arranged loads. Restack a load rather than take a chance. When traveling from lighter areas to darker areas and vice versa, your eyes take a few moments to adjust. Both pedestrians and drivers should take this into account and take extra care in locations like this. Always wear appropriate personal protective equipment. Different site requirements and different conditions will require different equipment. Special attention should be paid to your footwear. Not only is it important to wear the correct type, normally steel-capped safety shoes or boots, but it is important that they are kept clean. Mud, oil, and grease should be removed before operating a forklift. Make sure you always look in the direction of travel before you commence moving. Because it was a clear path when you arrived, don't assume, even after a short time, that somebody or something is not behind you. Whether loaded or unloaded, for obvious reasons, you should never pass underneath the forks. Rear steer vehicles have a sharp turning action. This is a characteristic of forklifts, and because of this ability, people tend to cut corners or alternatively allow the rear end to swing out. It is important that you become familiar with the extent of the tail swing of the forklift you are using. It is important to follow the safe working procedures that have been laid down in your work area. not only procedures that relate directly to the use of a forklift, but also the general procedures that apply to all work that is carried out. Forklift trucks are very useful in many industrial situations. Their safe operation is dependent upon them being in proper working condition, the operator using them within their stated capacities, abiding by the operational rules, and finally, by adhering to operational and safety procedures.